There's a bit in the book where I give advice to a young comedian, and it was triggered by my being a mentor for a young comic who asked me if I'd mentor them, and I said, yeah, sure. And I didn't realize how much I actually knew about this subject, because I did it for 35 years, worked all over Britain, America, Canada, and had varying degrees of success, and made a stand-up comedy film, had my own TV series where I had to do stand-up every week. I sort of know it. It was my job for 35, 40 years. So people ask me about how do you be a comic all the time. Cab drivers always want to know, whoa, how'd you do that job then? And I thought, well, why don't I write something down? And I was astounded at what I came up with, because it's not easy being a comic. There's an element of you either know how to do it or you don't. That's tough, because if you're naturally funny, then there's an argument that says just do what you're doing and you'll find your way. But there's plenty of people that are naturally funny who don't know how to make the step into professional show business. They just keep being naturally funny. You know those guys, you're at work with them and they're hilarious. You know, you go to the office and they're always the one with the story about how long it took them to get on the bus, and how somebody was breathing through their mouth while they were on the bus, how somebody was eating with their mouth open and what it sounded like, what their children were like that morning, and how, they've got funny stories about everything. But that's not being a comedian. Being a comedian is taking that and then systemizing it so that it never fails, so that every story is honed to a point where you know exactly where the laughs are going to be. Someone like Ken Dodd would calibrate his act so that he knew exactly how many jokes he was going to do in the first 2 minutes, what the laughs were going to be, how big they were going to be, and where it would climax. And he did that for every single one of his routines. And Ken Dodd had lots of different writers. Somebody like Bob Hope also had writers. Bob Hope would pay maybe $5 a joke, and he would write out checks and drop them from his balcony to his writers and say, thrill me. Other people will sit at the kitchen table and grind it out. Victoria Wood, Ben Elton, Jerry Seinfeld sit down at a table and go, okay, I want to do a joke about the weather. And so they'd sit there and they'd just write jokes about the weather for 2 hours. And what Jerry Seinfeld says is, as long as you're there, what happens is you do it for long enough and the jokes become apparent about the weather, or about shopping for shoes, or about being in a cab, or about eating in a fancy restaurant. The jokes occur, but jokes don't occur unless you're in the place, sitting there with your pen, drinking your cup of tea, and thinking, what's funny about this? So I would say, first advice, sit down and think about what's funny to you. Think about anything funny that's ever happened to you. Make observations about things that are funny and start to make notes about them. You don't have to write it in like, Chaucer or Shakespeare. Just make a note of all the things that you find funny and try and put them under subject headings. If you're a character comedian, of course, this is different. If you're a character comedian, you've got silly voices and silly characters, but you're going to need to write them. But you can pretty much improvise character stuff, but it does need organizing into a shape. So you might want to work with a director or a co-writer to help you think about the kind of material you're going to do in character. There are practical things, what to wear. A lot of comedians, when they're trying out stuff, just wear jeans and a t-shirt because it's comfortable and you can roll around on the floor. Robin Williams, I saw Robin Williams lots of times, and when he began, he used to dress like he was in the Cirque du Soleil or something. He always wore big baggy pants and brightly coloured t-shirts and berets. It was like he knew at some point he was going to roll around on the floor, and he didn't want to be wearing his best clothes. And as he got more successful, he would wear more grown-up clothing. But at the beginning, he would always wear very loose-fitting clothes because he was mime and silliness and rolling around and stuff, and he didn't want to be dirtying up good clothes. Whereas someone like Seinfeld was always in a jacket and shirt and trousers or a suit because he wasn't the kind of guy that rolled around on the floor. And Richard Pryor was hip, so he was a black guy with an afro, leather jacket, jeans, and then as he got more money, he could wear fancier clothes. Steve Martin used to wear a white suit because he wanted to be seen. When he did big stadiums, he wanted to be seen by people beyond the first 50 rows. And so there is that. Max Bygrave said to me one time, you know, when you walk on, walk around for a little bit. Let them have a look at the suit. Always wear stuff that's better than what they've got on. You know, those are tips that Max Bygraves gave me. And things like, if there's no dressing room and you're worried about how you're going to get your head together, go to the loo. You know, sometimes you go to a venue and there's no dressing room, so you have to go to the toilet. Close the cubicle and just sit there and just get your head together and just think about your show and what you're going to do. And if you've made a list of what the jokes are, just look at it. And then stay there for as long as you can until people come in and go, I hope this comedian's good. Until people do that. If he's not, we'll lynch him. You know, stay in there for as long as you can, get your head together, calm yourself down, and then go backstage and wait to go on. I was often sharing the dressing room with people, and that's always a bit contentious because you're in a dressing room with a ventriloquist, a stroppy comedian, and a girl singer, and you've got no way to get your head together. So you need to find space for yourself. When I was doing the New Faces final, I worked with a boogie-woogie piano joke-telling guy called Mike Felix, and he taught me how to meditate, close my eyes, and do deep breathing, in for 5, out for 5, and just let the kind of calm overcome you. And after about 5 minutes of that, you go on stage and you're very centered. So get yourself centered. And those are my tips. Oh, yeah, and steal jokes. You're going to need them.